Welcome to another edition of Fashion Council. Today I have the pleasure of being joined by Bill Ordauer. Bill, thanks for joining us.
Great, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So, Bill was previously the general counsel for Major League Soccer and has a lot of experience representing the leagues, European and US as well. So I guess the first question I would have for you, Bill, is we have a lot of retail clients that want exclusive deals with teams and the like. And so you've seen a lot of these contracts where a fashion brand wants to be the exclusive sponsor for a league jersey and the like. What do you see as the biggest difference between the US and the Europeans and in terms of those types of contracts or requirements?
Sure, it's a great question. In the US, there is a tendency for the leagues to strike a deal with one partner league-wide. Whereas the European leagues, it is more about individual team-by-team basis.
So I've always wondered, you have a player that might like a certain type of cleats or the like. Are they required to wear the branded cleats from the team sponsor?
It's interesting the way it works, and it's another distinction between Europe and North America. In Europe, the players can wear whatever shoes they want to wear, whatever cleats. In the US, a player can only wear different cleats if they have a bona fide agreement with a separate supplier. So they have the opportunity to strike that deal, but if they don't, then they're required to wear the league supplier or the team supplier.
That's interesting. I know in the tennis arena, we have clients that have the sponsorship is to very different items. Somebody sponsors you for the string, somebody sponsors you for the racket, somebody sponsors you for the apparel and the like, and the shoes. Those are all four different points for sponsorship. What I also find kind of interesting is I have seen some instances where an athlete has requested that we take a particular brand and try to shape the racket, for example, to be compatible with the other racket that they really like, which is a real problem, as you can imagine. I imagine, though, in Major League Soccer and the like, or the Europeans, that's not really that big of an issue. They're either dealing with the sponsored brand and they're comfortable with it, or, like you said, in the US, they would try to go get another deal if they weren't really happy with the pair of shoes.
You'd be surprised. It's actually a bit of a heavily negotiated point where sometimes players are very particular and they get into an issue of whether they're blacking out the logo and usually the uniform suppliers, they want to make sure that they have a chance first to fix the issue because they do think it's solvable. We've certainly seen in the golf world, it's become a big issue sometimes if somebody is a Nike sponsor or Titleist and suddenly for a certain event they decide to use another club. It becomes a big media hubbub.
I do remember a case where Raymond Weil had an exclusive watch deal with Charlize Theron, and they caught her outside with doing a photo shoot wearing a different watch, and they ended up terminating a multi-million-dollar deal on the basis of that. So I think celebrities have to be very careful if they have an exclusive with one brand and not really thinking it through and walking out with another brand.
It definitely puts everybody in an awkward situation because you also, as the supplier, you don't want to come out too harshly and you have to kind of act a little more nonchalantly about it, but certainly behind the scenes there is a lot of yelling and screaming going on, and it's our job to help manage through that.
The other thing I've seen is on soccer jerseys, sometimes there's multiple brands. How is that normally done? So somebody sponsors, I've seen jerseys with different logos on them.
It's an interesting discussion that goes into it as to whether you get more bang for the buck if it's just one brand versus multiple. And leagues often will look at it and say we don't want too much clutter. Often what gets said is in the more traditional sports, we don't want to look like NASCAR. But there's a lot of different philosophies on it, and slowly it gets to open up when you realize the revenue numbers that are at play. So in Major League Soccer, where I worked, initially you were allowed one brand on the jersey. Now it's been modified to allow for sleeve patches and other ways for more sponsors to get involved and for the league and teams to drive more revenue.
An interesting fact you shared with me was that the most successful World Cup ever in terms of advertising revenue was in the US, right? A long time ago.
Absolutely. The 1994 World Cup is still the most commercially successful. And I think there's this misconception that soccer just isn't that popular in this country. It's simply not true. When you look at the overall commitment across the US League, and when you have people watching international leagues here and the big events when they come, they are still big. This is absolutely a soccer nation.
So I would imagine that the 2026, when the World Cup comes back to the United States, would be a real opportunity for many retail companies with regard to advertising and really trying to get sponsorship of the uniforms.
It's going to be a massive opportunity for sponsors at so many different levels to get involved in this event, and certainly to connect with the national teams. It's something that all these brands think about. They do their deals in 4-year cycles, which matches up with the World Cup. And it's something that's always thinking about where do we want to be depending on where the event is held. And in particular, when the event's held in the US, which is such a massive commercial market, that is a singular focus for a lot of these companies.
So is it true that many of these deals are done before the teams have qualified? So you could sponsor a team like Italy didn't qualify last time and put your bang for your buck there. And
it's absolutely done ahead of time, and you're banking on the fact that, particularly for these top teams, that they're going to qualify. And when it doesn't happen, as a sponsor, you really have no recourse. For other teams that are maybe not necessarily expected to do it, it can also become a windfall for them because they may have a deal. And then there may be kickers in that deal, so that if they do qualify for the World Cup or they do advance a certain number of rounds, that there's additional revenue that they're generating from that.
Thanks again for joining us, Bill. Really appreciate the insight.
Thanks for having me, Tony.
Thanks again for joining us for another edition of Fashion Council.